So today we're going to talk about the Honda Fireblade. These were introduced in 1992 and they reshaped the world of sports motorcycles. For the first time, a manufacturer prioritised weight in order to achieve unrivaled handling and acceleration. Many sports and superbikes had come before, but this one floored the motoring press and made people re-evaluate what a road-going motorcycle could be capable of. Before this, top speed was everything to bike manufacturers, and in order for their bikes to be stable at high speeds, they had to grow exponentially heavier. They also tended to have very long wheelbases by today's standards, making them slow to turn. Now, Tadeo Barber, the creator of the Fireblade, recognised this trend, and he wanted to correct it. Boy did he achieve what he set out to, and then some. The first bikes were called SC28s, and they all had an 893cc inline-4 engine, making about 110 horsepower. The key changes for this model occurred in '94 when they revised the gearshift to make it less clunky, and they changed the styling to make it a bit more aggressive. They also played about with the suspension to improve handling, adding a compression adjuster to help customise for individual rider weight. Finally, they lightened the cylinder head by casting it in magnesium rather than the original aluminium. 1996 saw the first major redesign and a new model designation, the SC33. This featured a capacity hike to 919cc, which helped bump the power to 123 brake horsepower, and they lightened the engine internals as well. This, coupled with the new friction-reducing coating on the cylinder bores, helped it rev faster, and it was more aggressive compared to the old model. They also lightened the bike, managing this by thinning the wall sections down on the aluminium frame and swing arm extrusions, while also increasing the stiffness by modifying their cross sections. Brake discs on the front increased in diameter and revised calipers were fitted. The suspension was again improved and some further engine electronics were added. In 2000, Honda really looked at the engine to help compete with the Yamaha R1. It was completely redesigned and it was the first Fireblade to get fuel injection. Reviews were positive, but the fuel injection was jerky and it felt somewhat crude compared to its carburetor-fed predecessors. Regardless, it was a big increase in power, with 150 brake horsepower now available, and its over-square format made it more keen to rev. A quick explanation now of what over-square means. So, over-square means the engine has a shorter stroke. Stroke is the distance the piston has to travel between bottom dead centre and top dead centre. The shorter this distance, the faster the piston can travel up and down, which results in a higher revving motor. The higher the revs, the more power you make in simplistic terms. This was the first Fireblade to get a swing arm mounted directly to the engine as well. Logically, it's worth exploring this a bit. The engine block is incredibly stiff, so from an engineering perspective, using it as a mount point makes sense. Not only that, but it allows you to get the engine more central in the motorcycle. Mass centralisation was something Honda really got into with their GP bikes and the 1000RR generation, but they were certainly considering it here as well. 2002 saw the final iteration of the 900RR Fireblade, which Honda called the 954RR. This had a capacity hike to 954cc as the name suggests, and gained a smidge more power and torque over the previous generation. This was a response to the release of the astounding new GSX-R1000 from Suzuki, who stunned the world in 2001 with their new 160 horsepower superbike. Broadly speaking, the new Fireblade was very similar to the 929 which preceded it, but its more aggressive style helped to distinguish it. Honda managed to shave even more weight off though, getting it down to 168 kilograms dry, making it comfortably the lightest in its class and the lightest Fireblade ever made. They also strengthened various frame structures and revised the ECU and throttle for smoothness, power and efficiency. The 954 was the last Fireblade to be designed and signed off by Tadeo Barber. He himself rates it as the greatest motorcycling achievement he ever made, and he still owns one today. I mean, of course he would say that, but let's see how it stacks up and what it feels like to ride one in the present. So let's start with the ergonomics. The bike is compact and your knees are funneled into the tank. They're held securely in place by ridges running above your thighs. The bars are low, but they're not Kawasaki ZX-10R low. For me, I find there's slightly too much weight on my wrists, but the more frequently you ride it and the more miles you do, the more you get sports bike fit. Now, I know this is a silly expression perhaps, but you do have to hold your body in a different way when you ride one of these bikes. It is a focus machine, to state the obvious, it's not a cruiser. The seat's padded rather well for a sports bike though, and it's not a limiting factor when covering miles. The brake lever is adjustable for span and the clutch is adjustable for free play. You can set both to be comfortable for most handspans, and the lever efforts are light. The clutch lever hinge pin seems to wear disproportionately though, causing a lot of up and down movement. This can be shimmed out if it bothers you. The throttle is light and instantaneously direct. Free play can be adjusted out, which I like to do. Now, as a comparison, I rode the new GSX-R 1000 recently, and its fly-by-wire throttle results in a dead spot and free play, which aren't really conducive with a sports bike. I didn't like it very much, and this is so much better than one of those. Anyway, back to the Fireblade. The mirrors are good, they don't vibrate, and they give a reasonable view, albeit one with a lot more elbow in it than a Tourer would have. Cockpit dials are clear and easy to read. I particularly like the luxury of changing from miles an hour to kilometres an hour at the touch of a button. Brilliant if you frequently ride in Europe. Bar switches are all well located and easy to use. It's a Honda after all, so everything works just as you expect it to. The pegs are pleasingly rubber coated to help alleviate some vibes. They still kick up at the ends though, so your feet don't slide around when hanging off, and that up kick they have helps to locate the foot nicely. The rear brake pedal is adjustable and can be got into a comfortable position. It's nowhere near as tiny as some sports bike pedals, and this does make it easy to find. It's worth saying that although some people claim never to use the rear brake, I do. I find it helps with really slow speed stuff when you're indicating and looking around distractedly, but most of all, if the bike sticks its front wheel in the air, it's great to have an easy pedal to find to tame it. Gear lever is adjustable and can be got into a good position without difficulty. Rather like the clutch lever though, the hinge portion does wear, resulting in side-to-side free play. I've shinned this out in mine, and it's made the shift a lot more positive. Let's move on to the engine and drivetrain. The engine sounds coarse and it rattles on startup. The valve gear's noisy even with the correct tolerances, and the bike generates slightly more vibration than you might expect for a four-cylinder. The harsh noise is a product of very thin cylinder head and block castings. This is great for lightweight, but this combined with scant bodywork make it a mechanically very noisy engine. It's fed fuel and air by 4 individual throttle bodies, and there is a manual idle control if you end up riding where there are huge elevation changes. Throttle response is razor sharp, and the bike picks up with a cleanness and a sense of urgency. Gear shifting, especially engaging first when cold, sends a bang through the whole bike. It does get better when warm, but the gear shift is not this bike's finest feature. I fitted a Gillies gear support to the lever, which is supposed to strengthen the gear change and somehow make it more positive. Some bikes suffer with broken gearboxes or gear selecting problems. This support is supposed to eliminate the risk of gearbox damage. Now, I don't know how effective it is, but I do know it's very nicely made and it's an inexpensive peace of mind. Shifting clutchlessly at high revs is painless, and it's easy to do this smoothly. On the move, the gear change is decent. It's not as slick as some, but it's perfectly competent. Front brakes are 4-pot Nissans, and the discs were the largest diameter ever fitted to a road bike when they were released. Radial calipers and master cylinders became popular in racing around this time, and they soon filtered down to road bikes. This makes do without, and the feel and power is exceptional, questioning perhaps the need for radial brakes as anything more than a fashion accessory. Brakes and suspension are obviously inextricably linked with regards feel, and here there is the confidence to stand the bike on its nose from any speed consistently. They really are excellent road bike brakes, but if you do a lot of track work, you might want to fit a different master cylinder to get a more solid lever feel. The rear brake is a single pot Nissan, and it's adequate for the job, but it'd be nice if it had a bit more power. Suspension is handled by a set of Showa upside down forks on the front end. They're fully adjustable, and the spring rates feel about right for my weight of 75 kilos. I run standard preload on these, but with the damping backed off a couple of clicks. The rear shock is again a Showa unit, and is fully adjustable. I run an extra click of preload, but the standard damping settings. The suspension is soft for a sports bike, and it's very suited to road use. So what's it like on the road then? Around town, this bike is pretty good. Its lightweight and slim size mean easy manoeuvrability and the ability to sneak through narrow gaps when filtering. The seat is low, and that means me, at 175cm, I can get both feet flat on the ground. This isn't essential per se, but it means that on uneven or slippery ground it gives confidence. This bike and its predecessor were both criticised for abrupt and jerky fuel injection, but in reality it's fine. Not perfect, but certainly leagues ahead of something like a BMW K1200S of the period. Now that really was a bike with poor fuel injection. Brakes are easy to modulate, and so is the clutch. Motorway work is possible, and above 60 miles an hour, the wind helps to ease weight away from your wrists. I've dropped the foot pegs back and down by an inch with alloy brackets. This helps relieve knee angle. The seat's comfy, and it's possible to do a couple of hour stretches between fuel stops. It's a sports bike. It will happily sit on the motorway, but if you do it for a full day, you're gonna hate it. It's not what the bike's about, but at a steady 75 miles an hour, it will give 50 to the gallon. Ridden normally on twisty roads, expect that figure to be in the 30s. Open, twisty roads are where this bike truly excels, giving an intensity of feedback and confidence which really is on another level. The suspension has a level of compliance which will be unfamiliar to a conventionally sprung, more modern sports bike owner. In the dry, grip and feedback is exceptional. It encourages you to push it hard into corners and wind the throttle on early when exiting. There is no traction control, there is no stability control or 6-axis IMU, you're on your own, and boy is that exciting. Ridden hard, this is a flighty bike, front pointing skywards in first and skimming the tarmac comfortably into third. It will shake its head over bumps any time you have the throttle open wide and a bit of lean angle on. Owners and journalists tend to view this instability as wayward, but it's really just a product of the bike's short wheelbase, power, and the way it wants to be ridden. That instability is the trade-off for its razor-sharp turn-in. Most people recommend steering dampers, but I've never found it necessary. If you're comfortable with fast bikes and the way they move around, then you'll be familiar with what this bike does. It's lively like an original Lotus Elise in the wet is lively. If you know what you're doing, it adds to the friction of excitement, but it is leery in a way that newer Fireblades just aren't. It's worth saying a bit about tank slappers here. A tank slapper is where the bars of a motorcycle oscillate between steering lock to steering lock. It is terrifying. I've experienced one proper tank slapper, and that was crossing a white line in the wet at about 80 on an old T140 Bonneville. The crown of the road, coupled with the wet and slippery line, set up an oscillation which only died when the bike got down to about 40 miles an hour. I didn't use the brakes, I just hung on in wide-eyed terror, and it took about 10 minutes for me to stop shaking. Now that is a tank slapper. A Fireblade shaking its head over bumps momentarily is not. If you're riding TT level quickly on the road, then yes, you probably do want a steering damper. If, however, you're riding that quickly, then, well, a damper's the least of your problems. The noisy and coarse sounding engine at idle takes on a whole new character on the move. 3000 RPM heralds a step in power delivery, which then condenses in urgency all the way to the red line. This is a fast bike, easily quick enough to focus your vision into a tunnel when howling down a straight piece of road. The airbox noise is harsh and metallic, it's exciting and good sounding. However, it doesn't have the operatic quality of the best engines. I tend to find you learn a lot about a road bike when you try and ride it quickly in the wet. Firstly, you find out if the tyres are any good, but the levels of concentration needed when the roads are covered in shite go through the roof. The Fireblade is so easy to place and hold cornering lines with that it makes this challenge a joy. The brakes brim with feel, and if you're going to ride a bike quickly in the wet without ABS, then this is the bike you want to be on. UK roads are pretty terrible. Chewed up surfaces, gravel, pothole and vicious bumps mean that bikes which work well on smooth Spanish tarmac struggle here. There's a reason why seemingly every manufacturer uses Spain to launch bikes to giggling hordes of moto journalists intent on goodie bags and booze in posh hotel bars. What makes the 954 great is it works on British roads. A new GSX-R or R1 is so stiff and unyielding, they can be pretty unpleasant anywhere but a smooth tarmac racetrack. For me, sports bikes seem to have lost their way. They've become two-track focused. If you want the best, most complete and most exciting road-going sports bike ever made, then this might just be it. Thank you for listening to the Driven Wheel podcast. I'll see you again soon.